So dear students, so today our topic is HMP Shunt Pathway. Okay, so this pathway is also helpful for metabolism of glucose. That's why it is also known as alternative to glycolysis regarding for metabolism of glucose. Okay, so around 10% of glucose, so that was metabolized in our body through a hexose monophosphate pathway or HMP shunt pathway. So here I am putting one image. So regarding the conversion of NAD plus H and additions of two electron into a, it can form the NADH, or also that the after oxidations of NADH, once again it can convert into NAD. So dear students, so this NADH only it can form in the HMP shunt pathway. Okay, so other energy molecule they do not form through HMP shunt pathway where the glucose can be metabolized. Okay, in other pathway like TCA cycle, like glycolysis, where the ATP is formed for source of energy, so as well as FADH2 is formed for source of energy, and GTP will be found for source of energy. So as well as NADH is formed for a source of energy. But in HMP shunt pathway, so there is no ATP can be formed directly. Okay, so there is no formations of any steps. The ATP do not forms. Only it can forms the NADH. So this NADH, it is one of the energy molecule or biomolecule. It was helpful for regulations of various biochemical reactions in our body. So in our body, the various biochemical reactions occurs regarding formation of amino acids or synthesis of fatty acids or synthesis of essential cholesterol. So our body required different cholesterol, but whatever taken the cholesterol from the animal source, that was different. That was we do not required. Okay, in the intestine, so that was metabolized into free fatty acids. Then free fatty acids enter into liver. So where the desired cholesterol is synthesized, and cholesterol is the source for various steroidal hormones and steroidal drug in our body. Okay, so steroidal hormones like estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, so whatever the steroidal hormones are there, and regarding glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids, these all are considered as the steroidal hormones. So those hormones are required for the regulations of various biomedical reactions or biochemical reactions, and their synthesis was depending upon the availability of the NADH, and through this pathway the NADH is processed after or during the metabolism of glucose. So that's why, so HMP shunt pathway, it is one of the most important pathway. It was helpful for the synthesis of fatty acid, cholesterol, certain steroidal hormones, and as well as certain antioxidant molecule in our body. Okay, so antioxidant molecule means, so they always neutralize the toxicity or neutralize the toxicants or neutralize the free radicals. Okay, so for example I will tell to you, so during the COVID the doctors, so they are giving vitamin C along with antibiotics along with paracetamol. So already you are familiar. Okay, and also I suggest to you, you can use the fruits, you can use the nutrition, so that should be rich of vitamin C and with vitamin D, then you are free from the coronavirus infections. Okay, vitamin C is also natural antioxidant, and vitamin D, it can strengthen the body as well as it sometimes it acts as antioxidant, and as well as it was helpful for fight against the COVID-19. So that's why my suggestions for you and your family is you can use the whatever the source are there for vitamin C and vitamin D. For vitamin C, the sources are lemons and citrus fruits. Even now, our season there is a mangoes. Okay, so these mangoes, so they having vitamin C along with various minerals and electrolytes. Okay, you can prefer, but that should be naturals. Okay, so that should be came from your home, that is your field, not from the market. So marketed mangoes, so they are fruitified by applying the chemicals. Okay, definitely those are mangoes. Those are also came from our agriculture field, but so they are artificially fruitified with the help of chemicals. Then, along with mangoes nutrition, we will be eat the chemical also. If it is no alternative way for you, okay, you do not have any agriculture field, so then if you want to eat the mangoes, mean you can take the mangoes and wash them properly with the help of water and salt. Okay, one spoon of salt is mixed in the 1 liter of water. So then mix very well, then where you can wash the your fruits. So that fruits, that milk, the sorry, that salt containing water can neutralize the remove the chemicals. After that, in the next day, okay, you keep in the fridge or any other places safely, and after that you can prefer the mangoes. So that was use the vitamin C along with the electrolyte that was needed for in the summer cases. Okay, in summer cases we require the lot of electrolytes. Okay, so the God gives the one gift to us, because in summer only sweating is more, because due to sweating the loss of mineral is more. So that's why the mangoes is came in the summer only as a source of electrolytes. Okay, so they prevent us free from the disorders or diseases or weakness and fatigue. And also you can search out what is the source of vitamin D. So that is by sitting in on the sun in the early morning. Okay, when the sun is arises, so those are that rays when you fall on our skin. So that was helpful for synthesis of vitamin D. Okay, so if you are not exposed to early morning sunlight, means my suggestions for you, you can expose in the early morning. You early morning you can wake up and sit in your roof of their homes. So that where the sunlight indirectly that contain ultraviolet rays, so they fall on our skin, then skin is involved in the synthesis of vitamin D by utilizing the cholesterols. Okay, so what is cholesterol? So that is formed from the that is NADH, that was also synthesized from a cholesterol when that our skin was exposed to the sunlight. Then our body can strengthen, then we are free from the COVID-19. So like that the NADH, it was play most important role for synthesis of the steroidal hormones and multivitamins, many cholesterols, fatty acids and essential amino acids, and as well as it is helpful for to evoke the antioxidant property in our body to neutralize the toxicant, because due to this era or due to use of more mask, when our body can generate free radicals due to deficiency of oxygen, the free radicals are generated in our body, so they are toxic. So they are cause the failure of kidney, failure of liver. But if you having a sufficient NADH, means in your body the antioxidant property will be the sufficient, they can neutralize the dose. So for that purpose you can use the food that can stimulate the NADH, and as well as you can go for the aerobic exercise that can accelerate the HMP Shunt Pathway, then automatically it can use the more NADH to our body. Then NADH, it can enhance the synthesis of the reduced glutathione. Okay, so reduced glutathione, it is one of the natural substance synthesized in our body. So that was helpful for to neutralize the toxicant or oxidant. So that's why it acts as the antioxidant in our body to helpful for to neutralize the toxicants or to neutralize the free radicals. So they are generated in our body or came from the polluted environment. and that reduced glutathione synthesis is mainly depending upon the NADH. So that's why the HMP shunt pathway, it is one of the most important pathway. It can strengthen our body. It is always involved in the metabolism of glucose. So it is also helpful for to decrease the elevated blood sugar level. But along with that, it was helpful for to strengthen our body due to synthesis of the involved in the synthesis of the various substance, and also the NADH or this HMP shunt pathway required for the synthesis of the pentose sugars, and pentose sugar is required for as a base for synthesis of DNA and RNA. Whatever our body activities are there, biochemical reactions are there, or metabolisms are there, so they are mainly depending upon the RNA and DNA. And RNA DNA synthesis is mainly depending upon the 5-ribose sugar, and 5-ribose sugar is also synthesized through a HMP shunt pathway. So that's why this pathway is most important to maintain the overall growth of the body, okay, by supplying the continuously NADH as well as pentose sugars or many more compounds, along with to evoking or enhancing the antioxidant property through enhancing the synthesis of the reduced glutathione. So that is the one of the importance of this pathway. Okay, if any problem in there in this pathway, then the person was suffering from the various disorder like glycogen storage disorders is there, or even some drugs when you are taken they are not metabolized if HMP shunt pathway is altered. So these are the clinical prevalence related to the HMP shunt pathway. For example, gray baby syndrome is one of the disorder related to the one enzyme, okay, the glucose 6PD, okay, pyrrole dehydrogenase enzyme. So that enzyme is only found in this pathway. So that enzyme is required for metabolism of chloramphenicol. So that enzyme is absent in the children or infants, okay. And chloramphenicol, it is a choice of drug for treatment of malaria, okay. If infant or child, if they having malaria means where you can administering chloramphenicol drug means, so that drug do not treat malaria. Instead of malaria, it can produce the one disease. So that disease was known as the gray baby syndrome. That is the one of the disorder related to the this shunt pathway. Even the glycogen or glucose related disorder is also related to the HMP shunt pathway, or even the RBC's function that was also depending upon the HMP shunt pathway. So that's why it is one of the important pathway or alternative pathway for metabolism of glucose as compared to the glycolysis. Okay, so we learn regarding the introduction. So dear students, so HMP pathway or HMP shunt pathway is also called as the pentose phosphate pathway because it was involved in the, or this pathway is responsible for synthesis of the pentose sugar that was required for synthesis of DNA and RNA, and it is also known as the phosphogluconate pathway or hexomonose phosphate pathway. Okay, so that is the HMP pathway. It is alternative is, our alternative names are pentose phosphate pathway and phosphogluconate pathway. So this pathway, HMP pathway, it through which, so the pentose sugars are formed, or 3 carbon containing sugar is formed, that is triose is formed, as well as pentose is formed, or 6 carbon containing sugar is formed, as well as 7 carbon containing sugar is also formed through a HMP pathway. So that's why the HMP pathway, it is the one of the pathway, it helpful for synthesis of the various type of the sugars that may be related to the pentoses, hexoses, then 7 the heptatase, then as well as octase, then as well as trioses, Okay, so like that, many carbon containing sugars are 2 containing 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Those sugars are only formed through this pathway, and those sugars are also having the clinical importance involved in the various biochemical reactions. And this pathway is also, it is an alternative pathway to glycolysis and TCA cycle for metabolism of glucose. So already you learn, so the glucose first it can enter in the glycolysis and or it can metabolize glucose into a pyruvate. Then pyruvate it can enter in the electron chain reaction where the pyruvate can convert into acetyl CoA. Then after that it can enter in the TCA cycle where finally that acetyl CoA can convert into carbon dioxide and water. So like that the glucose can be metabolized by using the two main pathway. One is the glycolysis and TCA cycle. But this HMP pathway is also known as the alternative pathway for metabolism of glucose. It means the glucose is also metabolized through a HMP pathway, but that ratio is only, that was the 10%. So 10% of glucose that can enter in this pathway per day for metabolism of the glucose. It means, so this pathway is also involved in the regulations of the blood sugar level. If any problem in this pathway, then also the person was suffering from the diabetes mellitus or various carbohydrate related disorders. Okay, so HMP pathway is a more anabolic in nature. Okay, anabolic means the synthesis of new compound to use the smaller molecule and involved in the synthesis of the larger molecule, and such reactions was known as the anabolic. So in your body only two type of main reactions are there. One is anabolic, another is catabolic. Anabolic means involved in synthesis of new product, okay, simple into complex, okay, and catabolic means breakdown of the larger particle into smaller particle. For example, cholesterol is a larger complex, or any protein is a larger molecule, so they are metabolized and converted into a free fatty acids or amino acids. Okay, smaller compound. So where the large molecules are converted into small molecule, and such reactions was known as the catabolic reactions. And whatever enzymes or whatever drugs or hormones involved in there, so those are known as the catabolic agent or catabolic molecules. Okay, anabolic means utilize the smaller molecule and involved in the synthesis of the larger molecule. For example, in the liver, utilize the free fatty acids and involved in the synthesis of the cholesterol. Or in the same in the liver, utilize the glucose and involved in the synthesis of the larger molecule like a glycogen. Okay, so these are all are known as the anabolic reactions. And here the HMP pathway, it is more anabolic in nature. It is involved in the synthesis of the, or responsible for the synthesis of the larger particles. And this pathway is also concerned with the biosynthesis of NADPH and as well as pentoses. Pentoses, so they are required for our pentose sugar, so they are required for the synthesis of DNA and RNA, and NADPH, it is also required for various biochemical reactions and as well as the neutralizations of the chemical substances or toxicants or free radicals. That is the role of the NADPH. Okay, so and about glucose, only 10% glucose, so that can enter through this pathway per day, but in RBC and as well as in the liver, 30% of glucose can enter through this pathway. So already you know the glucose in RBC was metabolized, but it cannot use the oxygen. Okay, because the RBC do not containing mitochondria, It means in RBC the glycolysis do not occurs because lack of mitochondria, it do not got the hexokinase. So already you know the hexokinase is the starting enzyme. So this enzyme is required for to initiate the glycolysis, and this enzyme hexokinase, it was only found in the mitochondria, but in RBC the mitochondria are absent. It means in RBC the glycolysis do not occur, but RBCs are also cell. Okay, they also require the ATP for regenerations of their plasma membranes or for organelles metabolic activity. But that ATP or energy was produced or supplied through a HMP pathway. Okay, so that's why in RBC 30% of glucose enter in this pathway for source of energy for RBC. Okay, and also it cannot utilize that much of oxygen because RBC play important in the transport of the oxygen. Okay, but due to presence of HMP pathway, so that glycolysis is not present, so that's why there is no oxygen can utilization. So that's why RBC, it do not utilize the oxygen itself, it can carry that oxygen from lungs to the different parts of the body. In liver also, the 30% of glucose, so that can enter through the this pathway. So now we learn regarding the where or site, okay, for this pathway. So actually, so what are the enzymes? That is the key trans ketolase or dehydrogenase enzymes or hydrolase enzyme. So these are the main enzymes. So they are involved in the this pathway. So and those enzymes, so they are only found in the cytosol of the cell. So that's why, so this pathway is occurs in the cytosols. So during the HMP shunt pathway, so these organs or tissue of these organs are highly active. So like the tissue of liver, adipose tissues, adrenal gland, erythrocyte, testes, lactating mammary gland, so they are highly active during the HMP shunt pathway. It means the HMP shunt pathway, it is more occurs or abundantly occurs in the cell, cytosol of cell of liver, adipose tissues, adrenal gland, erythrocyte, testes, as well as lactating mammary gland. So it indicates the source of energy for these organ is rich or they are depending upon the HMP shunt pathway. Okay, so most of these tissues are also involved in the biosynthesis of fatty acids steroids. So they are depending upon the NADPH. So that was formed during this pathway, or this pathway is also responsible for the formations of the NADPH or sublife NADPH. So that was required for the fatty acids and synthesis of the steroids. So this is a site. It means the HMP shunt pathway, it is mainly occurs in the cytosol of the cell and frequently occurs in the cells of liver, adipose tissues, adrenal gland, erythrocyte, testes, as well as the lactating mammary glands. Okay, so next one. So regarding the HMP shunt pathway, so their features. Okay, so it is the start with the glucose 6 phosphate. So glucose 6 phosphate, it is the byproducts of glycolysis. Then that glucose 6 phosphate directly enter into the HMP shunt pathway, and this in this pathway, so there is no ATP directly or indirectly involved. Okay, either it is utilized, either it is produced during the HMP shunt pathway. Okay, and it is the multifunctional pathway and several interconverted substances are produced. Maybe that is a pentose sugar into tri-sugar, tri-sugar into pentose sugar, pentose sugar into heptose sugars into pentose. Like that, many interconverted substances are produced in this pathway. So that's what is known as the multifunctional pathway. And HMP shunt pathway, it is mainly divided into two parts. One is the oxidative pathway and another one is the non-oxidative pathway. Okay, first three paths reaction, so those are comes under the oxidative pathway, and later on up to 7 step, so there comes under the non-oxidative path. So like that, The HMP Shunt pathway, it will be occurs in the or categorized into two pathway, that is the oxidative pathway as well as the non-oxidative pathway. First to discuss regarding the reactions or steps, so those are comes under the oxidative pathway. It means the HMP Shunt pathway can regulated in the presence of the oxygen, and such pathways are known as the oxidative pathway. That is step 1, that is the conversion, okay, or oxidations of glucose 6 phosphate into a 6 phosphoglucolactones. Okay, so here in the step 1, the glucose 6 phosphate can be oxidized in the presence of the NADP plus and as well as the cofactor magnesium. Okay, so in the presence of glucose 6 phosphate dehydrogenase is also written as G6PD. You should be remember. So this enzyme comes under the many future in the diagnosis of diseases regarding the diagnosis of risk factor. That is a G6PD, nothing but glucose 6 phosphate dehydrogenase. It is the first enzyme in the HMP Shunt pathway, so it can oxidize glucose 6 phosphate into 6 phosphogluconolactone in the presence of NADP plus and as a magnesium. Okay, so this step is the rate limiting step, or whatever this NADPH is produces, it can control the reactions of HMP Shunt pathway, because if excess of NADPH, it can inhibit the activity of glucose 6 phosphate dehydrogenase, and lack of this enzyme, the HMP Shunt pathway cannot be continued. So that's why it is the rate limiting step due to presence of or formations of the NADPH. This NADPH, it can inhibit the glucose 6 phosphate dehydrogenase enzyme. So that's why it is having the capability to control the HMP Shunt pathway. In step 2, so this 6 phosphoglucolactone can be hydrolyzed. Okay, so then hydrolyzed into in the presence of water, and the enzyme that was hydrolyzed 6 phosphoglucolactone is a gluconolactone hydrolyzed. So this enzyme, it can hydrolyze 6 phosphogluconolactone into a 6 phosphogluconate. Okay, so in the second step, the hydrolysis is occurs in the presence of the enzyme gluconolactone hydrolase. Okay, so next one, that is the step 3. In the step 3, once again the oxidation process is occurs. So here the enzyme, this that is a phosphogluconate dehydrogenase enzyme, it can oxidize the phosphogluconate into a ribulose or ribulose 5-phosphate. Okay, in the presence of NADP and as a cofactor, that is the magnesium. So like that, in this pathway, the 6 carbon sugar is counted into 5 carbon sugar, that is ribulose 5-phosphate in the presence of NADP and magnesium. So that was oxidized by the enzyme phosphogluconate dehydrogenase, and also the carbon dioxide was released through these reactions, or step 3. And already you know, so this ribulose 5-phosphate is required for the synthesis of bases of DNA and as well as the RNA. So that's why this pathway, it's play important role in the synthesis of DNA and RNA by continuously supplying the base for DNA and synthesis like ribulose 5-phosphate. And after that, the HMP Shunt pathway, it can comes under the non-oxidative pathway, that is step 4. So here, so the ribulose 5-phosphate, it can epimerized into a xylulose 5-phosphate as well as ribose 5-phosphate. So in the presence of the enzyme like epimerase and keto isomerase, so that can convert isomerase that can convert ribulose 5-phosphate into ribose 5-phosphate. Then this ribophosphate 5-phosphate required for DNA synthesis that was found from the ribulose 5-phosphate. Then another enzyme epimerase, it can convert ribulose 5-phosphate into xylulose 5-phosphate in the step 4, that is comes under the non-oxidative pathway of HMP Shunt pathway. In the next step, that was known as the step 5, that is trans ketolase. So here xylulose 5-phosphate, it can transfer 2 carbon fragment to the ribose 5-phosphate. Okay, so during this reaction, so this xylulose 5-phosphate, it can transfer 2 carbon fragment to a ribose 5-phosphate in the presence of trans ketolase and TPP. TPP means thiamine pyrophosphate, and to form a pseudoheptulase 7-phosphate and glyceride 3-phosphate. So like that, in the step 5, the 3 carbon containing sugar is formed like glyceride 3-phosphate, and as well as 7 carbon containing sugar is also formed, that is the pseudoheptulase 7-phosphate in the presence of enzyme trans ketolase and TPP. So this enzyme, it was responsible for the formation of glyceride 3-phosphate and pseudoheptulase 7-phosphate, because so this enzyme is helpful for the transfer of 2 carbon fragment from xylulose 5-phosphate to a ribulose 5-phosphate. Then ribose 5-phosphate become the pseudoheptulase 7-phosphate. Then this xylulose, it can lose just 2 carbon atom, that's why it become the 3 carbon containing sugar like a glyceride 3-phosphate. Then further this glyceride 3-phosphate, it can enter in the glycolysis, then it can convert into a pyruvate. So next 7-6, that was known as the step 6 trans-aldolase reactions. So during this reaction, so in the presence of the enzyme trans-aldolase enzyme, so this pseudoheptulose 7-phosphate, okay, it can transport 3 carbon atom fragment to a glyceride 3-phosphate. Okay, in the presence of trans-aldolase enzyme, or the trans-aldolase enzyme was helpful for transfer of the 3 carbon fragment from pseudoheptulase 7-phosphate to a glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate. Then the two products will be yielded. One is a erythrose 4-phosphate and another one is a fructose 6-phosphate. Then fructose 6-phosphate enter in the glycolysis, then this fragment can be metabolized. So like that, the trans-aldolase is helpful for the formation of erythrose 4-phosphate and fructose 6-phosphate by transferring the 3 carbon fragment from pseudoheptulase 7-phosphate to a glyceride 3-phosphate. So this is the step 6 of the HMP Shunt pathway. Then last step, there is step 7, second trans ketolase reactions. So here the enzymes like once again the trans ketolase and as well as thiamine pyrophosphate. So these two components are enzyme in the presence of thiamine pyrophosphate as a coenzyme. It was helpful for transfer of 2 carbon fragment from xylulose 6-phosphate, it can produce in the step 4, to a erythrose 4-phosphate, it was produced in the step 6 in the previous. Okay, so where the xylulose 6-phosphate, it can lose just 2 carbon fragment in the presence of trans ketolase enzyme as well as TPP, and due to the erythrose 4-phosphate and yield, that is the fructose 6-phosphate, then glyceraldehyde 3-phosphate, and further The glycerol phosphate, it can undergo the reversal glycolysis and form the fructose 6 phosphate. Then these two components further enter into the glycolysis and over their metabolism. So this is regarding the second transcutaneous reactions or 7 step of the HMP shunt pathway. So like that, the HMP shunt pathway was completed. So within 7 steps and 3 steps are comes under the oxidative pathway and remaining 4 steps there comes under the non-oxidative pathway. So in this pathway, so there is no ATP directly indirectly involved either utilization or process. Only the NAD is involved. It can produce the energy rich molecule like a NADPH. So like enzymes like dehydrogenase and as well as transcutulase, aldolase enzymes and hydrolase enzymes. So they are involved in the regulations of the HMP shunt pathway. So next one we learn regarding the HMP shunt pathway, important why it is required. So this pathway is required for the synthesis of pentoses and as well as productions of the NADPH. And this pathway, HMP shunt pathway, it can continuously supply the 5 ribose, that is ribose 5 phosphate. It is the base for the DNA and RNA synthesis. So that's why it was involved in the synthesis of nucleic acids like DNA and as well as the RNA. So this enzyme is also, this pathway is also involved in the synthesis of nucleotides like ATP, NAD plus, FAD and CoA. Okay, in the alternatively, so it can involved in the synthesis of ATP or NAD because what are the enzymes they involved in this pathway, they are also helpful for synthesis of NAD or FAD or CoA and ATP. So regarding the importance, so HMP shunt pathway, it's play important role in synthesis of fatty acids, and fatty acids required for the synthesis of the various fatty components like LDL, HDL, many other components. So those are required for. So okay. So now we continue regarding the importance of NADPH. So this NADPH, it is required for the biosynthesis of fatty acids, and fatty acids play important role in the synthesis of various fatty component, fatty substances like cholesterol, then as well as HDL, LDL, VLDL. So these are all are required for the growth of the body, are required for the normal metabolism of the cell. Okay. So then the cholesterol is also synthesized by utilizing the NADPH, or NADPH is essential for the synthesis of cholesterol. Okay, cholesterol, if it is normal, then it is healthy. If it is abnormal, then only we are suffering from the metabolic disorder. But that cholesterol up to the normal range, it was required for biosynthesis of various steroidal hormones like vitamin D, then as well as fat soluble vitamins, then as well as that is glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids, then estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. So their synthesis is mainly depending upon the cholesterol. And also, so this NADPH is required for the synthesis of reduced glutathione. You should be remember. Okay. So this is the one of the most important component. Reduced glutathione is synthesized in our body through NADPH, or NADPH play important role in the synthesis of reduced. Haji, you have any doubt? Doubt है तो पूछ सकते बेटा. Okay, if you no doubt, shall I continue? Okay, so reduced glutathione, it is one of the main component. Okay, that are synthesized, that synthesis depending upon the NADPH. Okay, so this reduced glutathione, it is a natural antioxidant in our body. Natural antioxidant means they can neutralize the oxidant. Oxidant means during certain metabolic reaction in our body, the single molecule oxygen was generated, or in our body the H2O2 hydrogen peroxide was generated. So dear students, so this H2O2 you are using for coloring your hair. Okay, or also you are using for clearing the wound. but this H2O2, it is a highly toxic chemical, so that was processed in our body. Okay, so these are damage the tissues, or these are causes the death of the tissues or death of the cell without aging of cell. Okay, cell is death mean, tissue is death means the organ was failed, or many free radicals are there, so they are generated in our body, or some free radicals, so they came from the polluted environment. And even now we are using the mask due to deficiency of oxygen in our body, so these free radicals are generated definitely. So that's why we are using the continuously mask deficiency of oxygen, we having some fatigue, we having some other behaviors are developed, our irrational behavior was developed, our irritation was developed. That's why, that is the only the generation of free radicals or lack of oxygen to the organs. So that's why when you are alone, you go to your roof of your home, okay, keep the social distance and go for the aerobic exercise, or go for the deep respiration, inhalation and exhalation, by following the any meditation that can demonstrated by the, that is the Ramdev Baba, or as well as Sri Ravi Shankar ji, or even your favorite heroine like a Silpa Shetty is there. So they are giving certain meditations. So how to enhance the oxygen content in our body. But in our body, so natural antioxidant is also synthesized. That is the reduced glutathione. So this synthesis depending upon the NADPH, and this reduced glutathione, it is having the capability to neutralize the free radicals. Then we are free from the any kind of the metabolic disorder or abnormal physiology, and are free from the pathological conditions of the organs due to reduced glutathione. And as well as some peoples are told to you, you use the plenty of fruits, then you look like a young. Okay, you always look like a Aishwarya Rai. Okay, so some we are conscious regarding that we always look like a fairness like Aishwarya Rai or any other, that is Amir Khan's. Okay, always we look like a young, or Devanand ji. Okay, so always you look like a young. Okay, so when it is possible, so when in our body, so there is no chemical are process. If they are produced, mean they are neutralized. Okay, so those people, they consuming plenty of fruits, so they're depending upon the fruits only, and fruits especially that is the grapes, so that was enhanced the glutathione synthesis, that was containing the glutathione, or maximum fruits, so they are containing the reduced glutathione. We are preferring the fruits means our body can got the reduced glutathione, and this reduced glutathione from came from the fruits that was neutralized the chemicals. So my suggestion is you can use the fresh fruits. If I told to you, you always use the season wise fruits. Okay, you always use the which season the our nature can use the fruits, so those only you can prefer. So those are only natural fruits. So now the season for mangoes and the season for grapes, you can prefer those by washing, after the washing only. Okay, so that they are enhanced the reduced glutathione. Then always you are look like a fresh. Even you are working lot of, okay, still in the evening also you are look like a young. That is the use of plenty of fruits, okay, or vegetables due to supply of reduced glutathione. And NADPH is also play important synthesis of nitric oxide, and nitric oxide responsible for to decrease increase the diameters of blood vessel, then as well as to decrease the blood pressure. Okay, so that's why if you having a healthy HMP Shunt Pathway means we got more NADPH, from NADPH we got the more nitric oxide, then we are free from the hypertension, we are free from the increased blood pressure. And also, so this is required for the biosynthesis of steroid hormones. Okay, so that's why the HMP Shunt Pathway, it's play important synthesis of fatty acid, cholesterol, reduced glutathione, nitric oxide as well as steroidal hormones. Okay, so next one, so this pathway or NADH is also play important role in the synthesis of certain amino acids regarding glutamate dehydrogenase enzyme. So this enzyme is synthesized or activated during this NADPH, and that glutamate is involved in synthesis of many essential amino acids in our body. Okay, so next, so this NADH is also helpful for to neutralize the free radicals. Okay, so inhibit the free radicals or tau substance, because it can enhance the synthesis of natural antioxidant in our body, that is SOD, POD, and glutathione reductase. So these are the natural enzymes. So they are helpful for free radical, neutralize the free radicals. Those are generated in our body. So that's why NADPH or HMP shunt pathway is the most important pathway for various metabolic reactions or biochemical reactions, and as well as the defense mechanism by showing the antioxidant property.